ハローハローハロー、皆さんこんにちは。ティンカルチャンネルへようこそ。はい、本日2022年10月19日水曜日になりました。皆様いかがお過ごしでいらっしゃいますでしょうか。今日はですね、前回の、ビル・ライアンさんの動画のパート2になります。こちらなんですけども、パート1の方を見てからできればパート2を見ていただきたいんですけれども、少し長いインタビューなので2本立てにして構成してます。で、ティンカースチャンネルではですね、皆さんにいろいろな情報をシェアさせていただいてるんですけれども、ティンカースチャンネルではこれが正しいというような答えを皆さんに提供するのではなく、何かインスピレーションになるような情報を皆さんに投げかけて、おのおのですね、どう考えるか、どうやって受け取るかというのをですね、それぞれ考えていただくための、材料といいますか、きっかけになるような、番組になればなということで、すいません、うちの猫がニャンニャンしてますね。そういうことでそういった番組を作っていきたいということで立ち上げた番組になりますので、皆さんよろしければチャンネル登録の方よろしくお願いします。でまた動画をですね見ていただいてよかったなって思って、少しでも思っていただけたらですね、グッドボタンでサポートいただけたら大変ありがたいです。よろしくお願いいたします。はい、それではですね、ビル・ライアンさんの動画のパート2をご覧いただきます。それではどうぞ。
I would like to go back now to the controlling group and to their intentions. It is expressed that they are only interested in DNA. In certain situations, the beings learn to take responsibility. The beings become creative. The beings become violent. The beings become loving and caring. These abilities grow, and they are also becoming part of the DNA.Could this be a factor why this experiment is going on and on and on?
I understand why you're asking. This experiment is being conducted in a natural environment with all the richness of culture and society over hundreds of thousands of years contributing to the product of the DNA, to the evolution of the DNA, which can't be created in a laboratory somewhere, in my view, because Darwinian natural selection isn't the whole story at all. You're talking about a Lamarckian view, which is about the inheritance of acquired characteristics. This was he was a French biologist. His name was Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. You can go look him up. And he was a sort of a geneticist heretic, because he argued that it's possible for experiences and learning that have been absorbed and acquired during an individual's lifetime, that they also are passed on to our children, and this is one of the prime evolutionary mechanisms. And he was branded as crazy for quite a long time. There are now some evolutionary biologists who do not believe that it's quite as crazy as that. And while Charles is not a scientist, Charles has explained in his own words that it is understood on the inside that these mechanisms operate. It's not just about whether an animal survives long enough to have offspring and then it all just kind of passes the parcel down that line. There is growth, and there's learning, and there's development. And when you've got human beings involved, you've got consciousness that is riding in these vehicles, and the learning of the consciousness is also somehow absorbed and transmitted in the DNA. And so the whole thing is very multidimensional, the way that this DNA evolves. Mm-hmm. It's my strong suspicion, almost a certainty really, that the ETs who initiated this project, that they understood this perfectly well. But they can't engineer this as a completed product to their specifications. They have to allow this to manifest in a natural way. They couldn't create an apple in the laboratory. They had to grow it organically in the garden and sit and wait for it to grow. And why they're doing this, we can only speculate. But it's a pretty wonderful thing that they're doing. And we don't know about the ethics of the ETs, except that, according to Charles, he's mentioned this many times to me, they will not interfere in their experiment. They have a strict protocol that they won't interfere at all. That is letting this ball roll. What's happening on the inside is something totally different. This is not intended by the ET experimenters. It wasn't intended, for instance, that for the first time in all the cycles of human history, we've got hold of extraterrestrial technology now, in our generation. This never happened before and was not intended to be part of the experiment. And now you've got this dangerous situation that not only have you got this extraordinary, wonderful, creative, expansionist, expressive, and often very violent and aggressive human nature that we all have. And for anyone who doubts the violence of human beings, look back in history. It's everywhere. Okay. Look at the conquistadores. Look what happened to the Native Americans. Look what happened to the Maoris and the Aborigines and the San Bushmen. That if we take this, armed with extraterrestrial technology that we have acquired through shooting craft down, which is what he confirmed had been happening ever since the 1940s, and then we go out in the galaxy, justified by what he also confirmed would happen, which is a false flag alien invasion, a false flag threat, which framed the ETs as threatening to us, as hostile in some way, in very much the same way as we created the war on terror through 9/11. What happened in 2001 was that justified basically an aggressive military expansionist colonialism into Iraq and Afghanistan for all kinds of other reasons that were never made clear. And exactly the same thing. You take that military expansionist mindset and you map it onto a galactic theatre, and you've got exactly what is in danger of happening, justified by this idea that the ETs are threats, and in George Bush's words in 2001, we've got to go and smoke them out. I mean, that makes it sound laughable, but it's dangerously plausible. And many of you watching this will know that Werner von Braun actually warned his colleague Carol Rosin about this quite a long time ago. He said the next thing is going to be to set up these ETs as being violent, dangerous, threatening, and they're going to be the next created enemy, to justify space-based weapons, and not only space-based weapons in orbit around the planet, but space-based weapons going out into the solar system and beyond. We have this technology already. All we need is the justification. And Charles warned me that this is absolutely on the cards and is one of the plans that is going to be implemented pretty soon.
So what changes now? Are these people from this controller group getting in touch with you, do you think?
All I know is that I've been thrown a ball. And the ball was thrown at me in a very strange way. It's a kind of curve ball, but I caught it anyway. And maybe the ball was intended for me to catch in a peculiar kind of way. The history of the contact with Charles, and once again to encapsulate this, really compress it, is that Charles disobeyed his orders. He started to support me. Then he had to go on the run. He was attacked from the inside. He ended up having to flee the country. He was disenfranchised from his own life. His businesses were bankrupt. He lost millions of pounds. He was physically injured. And then when he returned to the UK eventually in November, he was asked to report in to the controlling group, which was, and he was very smart to do that. He did so. He was required to tell them exactly what he had done, what he had, who he talked to, and what his intentions were, and he was very smart to tell them the truth. And then they realized that they had an opportunity. This is what I believe has happened. This was never planned. Indirect relationship with somebody who in the meantime had sort of passed the tests as somebody who they felt that they might be able to do business with and might be advantageous for them to establish a dialogue with in some way. That's what I mean by being thrown the ball. So Charles is playing both sides. He will cheerfully admit that. He's walking a very delicate tightrope. But there's a possibility of an outcome here in which everyone could win. I can win, we can win as the alternative community, because we get to be told and entrusted with what the plans really are and what the problems really are. What we're being presented with we're just being presented with a layout on a table of like, you wanted to know what's happening? Here it is. Okay. And then are we smart enough to recognize for what it is? Some people have criticized the release of information and saying, well, we knew all that anyway. Well, that's not a very, if I may say so, that's not a very intelligent critique of a release of information if it's confirmation of what we already knew. Many people would think that that was valuable. A lot of people don't trust the motivation, and I can understand that as well. But it's possible that the motivation is one of taking this game to another level. As I said, it's experimental. If every single person in the alternative community rejects this information, decides that they don't want to do business, makes good, bad judgments, and decides that they're just going to go into the streets and fight or demonstrate, or I don't know what they think they're going to do, actually, that might not be a constructive outcome for this. But if there's the possibility of a dialogue, if there's a possibility of an increase in understanding, if there's a possibility of something that moves this to a different level and breaks the cycle and starts to help us think in terms of truth and reconciliation, as I was talking before with the South African analogy, then it seems to me to be worth doing. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm taking it day by day. No one's contacted me. Maybe the whole thing's a figment of my imagination. Maybe Charles is deceiving me. I don't think that's happening. And so it's an opportunity that's worth taking. It's a gamble that's worth taking. And in the meantime, we are being presented with some very interesting information. And it's not easily digestible. It's not palatable. It's not the kind of thing we want to hear. But it might be true. And if it is true, we have to check it out in all of its aspects. Now, there's another aspect to this, which is a question that you haven't asked yet, and maybe you're just about to, about the philosophies on the inside.
I have heard the expression purist. I think this group is calling themselves the purists. Could you elaborate on this expression?
This is Charles's term, I believe. And let me step back and explain this a little bit, if I can. What was explained to me was that the controlling group has got a spectrum of approaches, because these are all individual people with individual personalities, and they interpret their responsibility not all in exactly the same way. Some of them Charles describes as being very purist, which means that in the medieval sense, and this is an analogy, if I'm a purist and somebody steals my wife, and I'm living in the year 1800 in Britain or Europe, okay, I don't stab that guy in the back with a knife down a dark alley, even though I'm angry with him because he's stolen my wife. Okay, I challenge him to a duel because this is a matter of honor. If somebody has stolen my wife, he's dishonored me, and so I challenge him to a duel. And then at dawn, 6 o'clock in the morning the next day, he has his musket and I have mine, and then we fire at each other on a signal. And that's the honourable way to settle this. And I might not make it through. This is part of of an ancient tradition, which is the concept of the fair contest. And this is something that Charles alluded to in his interview with me, which was published on the 1st of January. The idea of a fair contest. The members of the group who are purists will allow things to happen to the extent that if a contestant presents themselves, then they are obliged to engage in the duel. They're obliged to engage in the jousting match or the sword fight. Because this person has challenged them in some ritualistically meaningful way. And so they accept that challenge. They have to. And then whatever happens, happens, because they're allowing it to happen. It's a sort of natural progression, a sort of natural selection. So the purists will allow things to roll without interference. And my understanding is that it's the purist component of the controlling group that is holding sway here and is sanctioning this release of information because it's there, because it's being done, because these events have happened, because Charles has taken it upon himself to take the risks to contact me, because I've taken it upon myself to take the risk of publishing this video, and because it's right there on your computer screens right now as you're watching this. This means that it is being permitted to happen, and it's being permitted by the purists who are not interfering in that process, in that natural process. Now, at the other end of this spectrum, there are individuals, or there have been individuals within this group that haven't looked upon this in exactly the same way. And it's a genuine philosophical discussion within the group. Somebody who has a less purist attitude would say, it's okay to shoot that guy Bill Ryan in the head down a dark alley at night, or to put a bomb under his car, or to do whatever, to sort of interfere with this natural process. Because if he wasn't smart enough to figure out that that was possible and to take the necessary defensive actions, then he had it coming to him. It's like all's fair in any kind of a fight. And that has its own justification as a natural rollout of events. In other words, if I wasn't smart enough to wear a bulletproof vest, then I deserve to get shot. A little bit like that. So whereas the other real purists wouldn't even try and shoot me. They'd just say, well, actually, we're going to let the guy speak. And then we'll find out whether the public are smart enough to pay attention to him. And if not, then the verdict of the alternative community may well be that no one's going to listen to this anyway, in which case there's nothing to worry about. But no one can say that we never told people, because the protocols of this entire group for a long time have been to have all the information out in the open for people who are awake and aware to pick up. This is what the Georgia Guys turns are all about. This is what the murals and Denver Airport are all about. It's all there. But who is it who actually really pays attention to this stuff? Only a tiny proportion of the world's population. And so from their point of view, whichever end of this purist spectrum they're on, they're kind of saying, well, you know what? The public is just too dumb to understand what's happening, so we're going to carry on and doing it anyway. But no one can say that we didn't actually warn them. It's kind of their response to the whole notion of karma. It's like they're kind of saying, well, if people are so dumb that they don't realize what's going on, they sort of deserve it.
Well, that's a hard pill, isn't it? Or a bitter pill.
It's
picture of a good God protecting us. And now we learn that the beings who control this planet are challenging us. If we're smart, if we learn, if we try to understand, if we give our best, then we are not like rebels fighting, struggling. Then we are putting ourselves on a level that they take seriously.
Correct. That's exactly correct, in my view. That's the way I understand it. If we're smart, if we're honourable, if we pick up this ball quickly and we understand what's happening, if we respond in a way that is regarded as being appropriate, then we will be respected, and then we will earn more. If we don't, if we rubbish it, if we insult them, if we say it's all crazy, if we prefer to stick our, in my own view, to stick our heads in the sand and listen to a lot of other stuff that in my view isn't true at all, then they're going to say, well, we told them, they didn't listen, and then they're going to carry on doing whatever it is they're going to do.
Well, challenging can be quite painful, but there's a lot of good quality in it. The growing process is...
It's a catalyst.
It's a catalyst, exactly. So it's not about good and bad, rather than the good in the bad and the bad in the good.
It's the sand in the oyster that creates the pearl.
Yeah, beautiful picture. It's a beautiful picture. We have to have something to chew on in order to grow.
I fully agree.
And in this you see your role to publish enough that many people hear about this and can make their own decisions in life.
I'm a messenger, and what happens is what happens. I'm kind of being a purist myself in this. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know whether we deserve to get any more information. That's not my call to make. If I receive more information, then I will release it. I do not know what's going to happen. And I think anything can happen. And I think what happens is to some significant degree up to us.
はい、ビル・ライアンさんの動画パート2いかがだったでしょうか。いろいろですね、すごくなんていうんですかね、哲学的な話にも聞こえてですね、とてもなんていうのかな、私は考えさせられるような動画だなと思って見てたんですけれども、皆さんどう思われたでしょうか。私的にはですね、なんていうのかな、ビル・ライアンさんの考え方、視点というのがですね、すごく大きな視野で物事を見ていらっしゃる方だなっていうふうに思いまして、普通に善悪で私もすぐ判断したくなっちゃいがちなんですけれども、そういうことではなくて、悪い中にも良いことがあって、良いことの中にも悪いことがある。全ては陰と陽があって、お互いを理解し合いながら共存していくことによって、世界が次のレベルになるんじゃないかというようなお話だったと思うんですけれども、もしかしたら他の捉え方をしていらっしゃる方もですね、もちろん十人十色なのでいろいろあると思います。いろいろですね、考えるきっかけになったと思いますので、こういったですね、動画結構脳みそをですね、ぐるぐる結構チクチク刺激すると思うので、すごく私は大好きです。考えさせられる動画大好きなので、こういった動画をですね、今後もシェアさせていただきたいと思います。で、ビル・ライアンさんの方ですね、いろいろ他にも動画がありまして、ちょいちょいですね、私も見てですね、シェアしていきたいなとは思ってますので、こうご期待ということでお待ちいただければと思います。で、引き続きジョセフ・ライアンさんのですね、動画ももうすぐ上がってるのかな。とりあえず今週木曜日あたりにアップできればなと思ってますので、ご期待ということでよろしくお願いいたします。はい。この動画ですね、良いなというふうに思っていただけたらグッドボタンの方で応援をよろしくお願いいたします。で、またですね、チャンネル登録の方もよろしくお願いいたします。それでは、今回の動画以上になります。今回も見ていただきましてありがとうございました。Tinker's チャンネルでした。Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Tinker's チャンネルでした。またよろしくお願いします。Stay tuned. Bye bye. Much love.